Hello again, feral friends and fellow nature nerds, and thank you for tuning in to Dirt Dispatch number 49. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So recently I've been reading the book Knowing the Trees by author Ken Keffer. It's a wonderful book covering everything you need to know about not just tree biology, but a variety of other plant and animal species that live in forests. And it does it in easy to consume small chunks that keep me interested without starting to feel overwhelmed. I highly recommend it. But one of the things mentioned in the book is American folk hero Johnny Appleseed, and that's what I'm talking about today. Now, if you're an American, you've probably heard about Johnny Appleseed, but just in case you're not familiar, Johnny Appleseed is an American folk hero. Now, the story of Johnny Appleseed is that of a nomadic, rugged young man wandering the land barefoot, wearing ragged trousers, a coffee sack for a shirt, and a pot on his head like a backwards baseball cap, and, of course, randomly planting apple seeds wherever he went. In those tales, he's cheerful and generous, living in harmony with the native people of this land. He has an affinity for wilderness, is knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, and has a gentle approach to wildlife. I'm not going to lie, it's a really good story. In one tale, he has a wolf that followed him after he healed its injured leg. In another, he doused his fire after seeing mosquitoes fly into it, not wanting his comfort to be the reason another creature, even a mosquito, died. In yet another tale, he heard that an injured horse was going to be put down, so he bought the horse and a few grassy acres nearby, then turned the horse out to recover. When it did, he gave the horse to someone in need. And while all the stories about Johnny Appleseed may not be entirely true, like any good folk tale, they're rooted, if you'll pardon the pun, in truth, based on a real person. That real person, the man behind the myth, was a fellow named John Chapman. John Chapman was born in Leominster, Massachusetts on September 26, 1774. According to some accounts, in 1792, at the age of 18, John and his 11-year-old half-brother, Nathaniel Cooley Chapman, headed west. And for the next 13 years, the pair apparently did live a nomadic lifestyle, although sans apple seeds at that point, until their father brought the rest of the family west in 1805 and the boys rejoined them in Ohio. Nathaniel stayed to help their father farm the land, but John started an apprenticeship as an orchardist, thus inspiring his lifelong journey of planting apple trees and the subsequent myth of Johnny Appleseed. But here's the thing, land records let us put together a much more reliable record of John Chapman's legacy. He wasn't so much a vagrant, wandering around aimlessly and planting apple seeds willy-nilly. He was a businessman, a knowledgeable orchardist who accumulated wealth in the form of planned and planted orchards. At that time, claiming land was merely a matter of clearing it and planting something on it. John Chapman claimed thousands of acres by planting orchards. While he sold many of these orchards throughout his life, at the time of his death in 1845, he still owned over 1,200 acres of orchards across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana. And while he was a businessman, the image of Johnny Appleseed as a barefoot, coffee sack wearing wanderer with a pot on his head is, again, actually based in truth. Author Rosella Rice, who met Chapman in his later years, described him as, quote, a small, chunked man, quick and restless in his motions and conversation. His beard, though not long, was unshaven, and his hair was long and dark, and his eyes black and sparkling. He lived the roughest life and often slept in the woods. His clothing was mostly old, being generally given to him in exchange for apple trees. He went barefooted and often traveled miles through the snow in that way. He wore on his head a tin utensil which answered both as a cap and a mush pot. And when he passed away in Fort Wayne, Indiana, his obituary, published on March 22, 1845 in the Fort Wayne Sentinel, stated that, quote, the deceased was well known through this region by his eccentricity and the strange garb he usually wore. He is supposed to have considerable property, yet denied himself almost the common necessities of life, though not much perhaps for avarice as from his peculiar notions on religious subjects. He devoutly believed that the more he endured in this world, the less he would have to suffer, and the greater would be his happiness hereafter. He submitted to every privation with cheerfulness and content, believing that in doing so he was securing snug quarters hereafter. In the most inclement weather, he might be seen barefooted and almost naked, except when he chanced to pick up articles of old clothing. And, by all accounts, he was in fact a kind and generous man. Now, I'm a big fan of apples. I'll eat them straight up, I'll eat them with pancakes, apple crisp, apple brown Betty, apple cider, and of course, apple pie. Some of my fondest core childhood memories are going out to the apple orchard with my family in the fall. Shout out to Edward's Apple Orchard in Poplar Grove, Illinois, and picking bushels of apples. Afterwards, we'd get apple cider donuts and a big slice of warm apple pie topped with melting slices of Colby cheese. Now, before all you non-Midwesterners come at me about cheese on apple pie, don't knock it till you try it. And besides, fruit and cheese are a common combination when you stop to think about it. Charcuterie boards usually feature cheese and grapes or other fruit. Wine and cheese pairings are common, and what's wine but alcoholic grape juice? I have a recipe for a delicious apple and goat cheese tart appetizer, and of course, some people even like pineapple on pizza. You might think these people need therapy, but I'm not here to judge. Anyways, I had a point. What was it? Oh, yeah. Red and golden delicious apples are the two most commonly linked to John Chapman's plantings. But most of the apples harvested in his day were not intended to be eaten or turned into delicious desserts. You see, Chapman lived up to the Johnny Appleseed moniker because he did plant his orchards from seeds, as opposed to the technique of grafting, which is how we've created most modern apple varieties. John Chapman actually rejected the idea of grafting on religious grounds. He thought it caused the trees to suffer. But without grafting, only about 1 in every 100 seedlings will yield an apple that's edible. Henry David Thoreau wrote that an apple grown from seed tastes, quote, sour enough to set a squirrel's teeth on edge and make a jay scream, unquote. So the norm in the 1800s were small, tart varieties of apples, much like crab apples today. Collectively, they were known as spitters and made into vinegar, hard cider, or the alcoholic beverage Applejack, which was hard cider whose alcohol content was increased by letting it freeze and then removing the ice. Ultimately, since Chapman's apples were mainly only good for making cider, his gift wasn't so much bringing apples to the frontier, but alcohol. Journalist Michael Pollan described him as, quote, the American Dionysus. Ironically, the only known surviving tree planted by Chapman in Nova, Ohio, survives today thanks to the technique he staunchly opposed, grafting. And more than 10,000 clones of this tree have been distributed far and wide. So, in that sense, Johnny Appleseed's legacy of spreading apple trees continues. I'm going to end with a poem written in 1880 by abolitionist author Lydia Marie Child. In cities, some say the old man was crazy, while others said he was only lazy. But he took no notice of jibes and jeers, he knew he was working for future years. And if they inquire whence came such trees, where not a bough once swayed in the breeze, the answer still comes as they travel on, these trees were planted by Appleseed John. And with that, my feral friends, we come to the end of this episode. Remember, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And a couple dollars my way keeps this podcast in play. So if you'd like to support the podcast, here's how you can do that. Become a patron. Subscriptions start at just $5 a month, and with 3 paid months, you get some very cool dispatches from the Forest merch. You can find all the details at patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. You can donate using PayPal or Venmo and my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. You can also use that address to email me if you have a question, a comment, or a request for a future episode. You can donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd. If you prefer to just send a check, shoot me a message. I'll be happy to provide my mailing address. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest, then click on products and find something that you like. Finally, follow Dispatches from the Forest on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dispatches from the Forest recognizes that the lands where we live, work, and recreate are the traditional homelands of the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho people. We understand that this land holds immense significance for the original stewards, native nations, and peoples of this region. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.